650 horsepower is a massive amount of grunt. It's way more power than anybody needs, but the number has become commonplace nowadays because of so many powerful cars that are out there. So what does it actually feel like? We live in a world of 2,000 horsepower electric hypercars. So this old pushrod V8 rear-wheel drive manual transmission makes this C7 Z06 basically a dinosaur. But there's a chance that its lack of technology actually makes it a better sports car. Let's go find out. This 2015 Chevy C7 Z06 Corvette comes with a 6.2 liter supercharged V8 as I bounce down this bumpy little piece of road. And that engine produces so much power, 650 horsepower, 650 foot-pounds, in a vehicle that weighs not a featherweight amount, it's a little over 3,500 pounds. I was actually surprised to find out this car weighed that much because A, it doesn't really feel that heavy, and B, I thought that as a Z06, it would have to weigh less than that. Apparently not. So if we do the math to calculate the power to weight ratio like we must, that's 369 brake horsepower per ton. Now for reference, a normal fast car is about 200 brake horsepower per ton. Something that's genuinely really, really fast is 250 or 300 brake horsepower per ton. So the fact that this is 369 horsepower per ton means it is incredibly fast. And if my recollection is correct, this is the fastest car by power to weight ratio I've ever driven. And it feels like it. Yowza. The testing habitat here today is a beautiful canyon road. I've also commuted to work in this car because I think it can do that kind of dual purpose. But when Chevy originally devised this car, it was a track car. This is something that's meant to go out and pound some miles on a racetrack. I think the surprising thing about this car is that it only gets better with speed. And I'm sure there's a limit to that once you lose traction or something. But I thought that it had good feel and good steering and good pedal feel. And I was wrong. It's fantastic. Because up here on this canyon road, even though I'm going objectively slow compared to what the car can do, I still get to feel everything that it has to offer, and I'm blown away. Now maybe I shouldn't be, because everybody knows that a Corvette, especially a Corvette Z06, is a dedicated sports car, and it should be good. But it's just not the case all the time. Not every sports car is as good as it really should be. And so I was skeptical, but I was wrong about that. Brakes feel strong. Of course, the motor feels ridiculously strong. There's little to no body roll. The steering is so communicative. It's not light, it's fairly heavy, but you do get a lot of feedback and you get a lot of positive reinforcement. Whenever you make a change, it immediately is reflected in the behavior of the car. Now, this is a decreasing radius, tight hairpin turn with a nice drop off all on the outside. So we're gonna go plenty slow. Especially if anybody else is coming around this corner. We don't need to get in trouble with them as I do a terrible rev match. That sunrise is just beautiful. Oh my God, that's absurd. There were some complaints about this car early on because the previous generation Z06 Corvette was naturally aspirated and it was pretty competent on a racetrack. Apparently this one was not. This one being supercharged means that there's a great big heat soak on top of the engine, and allegedly it wasn't sized properly to be able to withstand constant track use. And so I've not experienced it because I frankly am not driving hard enough, but apparently what happens is that when you're on track driving it hard enough, then the engine will just go into limp mode in 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then this $100,000+ sports car you bought now just doesn't work. It's too hot, it's gotta cool off. So then you were left with basically two options. Sell the car and buy something that could actually do what it was marketed to be able to do, or to try and fix this car with a bunch of aftermarket modifications like heat exchangers, or people put on bigger superchargers that had more thermal capacity. It was a little bit of a tricky thing because GM marketed this for track use. That's what its intended purpose is, and yet it wasn't able to deliver on that for any length of time at all. Maybe a hot lap or two, but that's about it. For that reason, I always looked down on this car to a certain degree because I thought it doesn't do what it was built to do. It's supposed to be able to go out and be driven hard, and if it can't do that, then that's a core failure. But now that I've spent several days with it, I have a different opinion of that. By and large, we're driving the car like this. 38 miles an hour, third gear, having a good time. I have no complaints. And when you want the power, you've still got the power. You've got the great brakes, you've got the great suspension. Now, is it an absolute track weapon like a GT3 or something else that's dedicated to just lap all day long? No, it's just not that. It can't be that from the factory as it is. It would have to cost a lot more money. And the beauty of the Corvette has always been its value proposition. That's its other intended purpose. The amazing thing is that you can get a car with supercar levels of performance for sports car levels of money. And I never really knew what that meant until now. I never really knew what people were talking about whenever they say that, oh, the interior's not very nice, it's hard plastic everywhere, the leather's not very great, you know, the surfaces are fine, but they're not the best. And as you drive along in this thing and you feel it creak and bend and squish about, yeah, I get that now. I can understand the sentiment there, and that, yeah, something like a Porsche is built better, just is. But the problem with that is that those cars are twice as much money, at least. So for the everyday person who's an enthusiast, who wants to have a fun, interesting, exciting sports car, the intended purpose is met with the Z06. It's incredible. It's way more car than you could ever need. And frankly, if you're as good of a driver as it takes to overheat something like this, you're one of the few. Congratulations. Let's talk about the design of the C7 Corvette Z06. This is the furthest iteration of the front engine, rear drive Corvette model. This is one of the very last cars that were built before the Corvette switched to a mid-engine layout. And so this still has those classic Corvette proportions of a big long nose, a relatively short, squat rear section. And because the Z06, it's got these wide body flares and arches everywhere. It's super aggressive, these giant air ducts here in the side. I could stick my whole hand in here and get it stuck. There's functional ducts down here. Here on the hood, there's functional heat escaping. I can feel it right now from me driving the car right now. That's working. Everything on the car is built around function and downforce and speed. Now, I'm not a small person by any means, but look at the roofline of this car. It's actually below my hip bone. That's incredible. If I was younger and or more athletic, I could probably jump over this car. It's so low. And obviously now that we have the C8 Corvette with the engine here in the back, it's a whole different look. It's way more European. It's way more Ferrari or McLaren as far as its overall body proportions go. But in my mind, for almost any front engine rear drive car, this shape is one of the best. There's some Ferraris out there with front engine V12s and a couple others out there that are contenders like Aston Martins. But by and large, I feel like the C7 Corvette is one of the best looking shapes out there on the road. And up here at the front of the car, you can really see just how much business it means. The front tires on this are 285s. That's a wider section than most Mustangs came with, and it's the front. Let's go look at the back. The rears are absolutely massive. You don't get the profile really by looking at it from the side here. I'll show you a rear low angle here in just a minute, but they're absolutely huge. These tires are 335 width, 25 profile, and 20-inch round wheels. Look at how absurdly wide these tires are. My gosh, so much meat. And on the inside, the theme of focus and purpose continues. You've got a really nice cockpit setup with everything that's really centered around the driver, and everything is within easy reach. Your manual transmission, your pedals are set up really nice for heel and toe. It's super easy to do, despite the fact that it's a massive angry V8 and it's always trying to kind of bite you. The display screens are nice and clear. Everything is set up with the proper sports car seating position. You've got mode selectors down here in the middle to go from wet weather mode into eco, touring, sport, and track. And frankly, I'm not using track. I'm on the road. I don't want to get into any trouble in this thing and get it any more squirrely than it already is. So why would anybody want something like a C7 Z06 Corvette when you could have something like a Tesla Plaid or a Lucid or any other modern day car with crazy horsepower figures, probably electric or at least hybrid, and more technology? You could have a faster transmission, you could have more sophisticated suspension, and everything could be, on paper, a much faster, more interesting, more visceral, crazy experience. And if you bought into that spec sheet myth of more is always better, then yeah, you could get a much more competent vehicle than this one. But the point of a sports car and the point of going out for a fun drive on an early Sunday morning at 4 a.m. before the world is awake is to have an experience. And when our goal is, as enthusiasts, to have a fantastic driving experience, we don't necessarily need the fastest thing. We need the best thing. This car has 46,000 miles on it now, and it's probably worth somewhere in the realm of $55,000, $60,000 maybe on a good day. And for that money, you could get a new Mustang with a manual, which would be fun. You could get like the most broken down, beat, engine blown up McLaren. But as it sits today, for the money, this thing is an absolute monster. And at the same time, it gives you so much. It involves you in the process of driving so much. Yeah, the guy next to you in the Tesla Plaid who's at the stoplight, who thinks that he's Johnny Drag Racer, will absolutely decimate you. There's no way around it. This is not a drag racing car. Frankly, I'm not even sure it's a road racing car because it's not a racing car. What this is a sports car. Listen to this as the sound of the car echoes off the canyon walls early in the morning. It's incredible. It's visceral. It's asking me for something because I'm the one having to rev match. I'm the one having to shift the gears. I'm the one having to be in control of this because frankly, the car's not here to help me. The car isn't smart enough and sophisticated enough to save me from myself. And that's really the job of a sports car. It's to take everything that you have going on in your life, wash that away, and focus you just on this act of driving. You're not thinking about work. You're not thinking about your text message dinging in your pocket. You're not thinking about the problems you have elsewhere. You're a driver. Let's drive. Gotta talk about the power and how fast this car actually is. For one thing, I think it has probably too much power. It's got all-season tires, which means it's not going to hook up whenever we do an acceleration test here in just a second. And just in general, it feels like I can't use what I have. And that's something that I never really understood about having a lot of power because I always thought the temptation would be the annoying thing. Oh, I've got all this power. I want to use it. I want to go fast. I want to do this. And that's just not been my sensation in driving this car for a while because I don't really want to get pulled over or go 140 miles an hour. What I want is to use the car that I'm in. I want to be able to exploit what it has. And the fact is the limit of this car is just so high. The power level is so high. The grip is so high. You just can't do it. So you're stuck using 15% of the car almost all the time, which is pretty annoying. And so in a different way than I thought, the power is a problem. Now, of course, it's fun. Whenever you hook up, whenever you do have a little bit of space and whenever you can get into it, it's pretty incredible. And I'm shocked at how much of it there is. It feels like there's at least 100 more horsepower than I feel like is necessary. And so that's just a hoot. And the car does help you a little bit. Whenever this little orange light is on and you've got the auto rev matching on by pulling this paddle, then it auto rev matches for you beautifully. It's just perfect. Watch, we'll go into sport mode so you can hear the exhaust doing its thing as it rev matches. And we'll go from fourth down to third down to second, and you'll hear just how perfect these rev matches are. Ready? Here we go. Butter. All right, time to take the big courage pill and go ahead and do an acceleration test here. Now, because this is not my car, because I don't want to have anything bad happen, I'm not doing a full drag launch. We're gonna do my pseudo drag launch, which is 20 to 70 miles an hour. What I find in my own testing is the time you get is really similar to a great drag launch from 0 to 60, but it's way less harsh on the vehicle itself. So that way we don't have to mess up somebody else's car. We don't have to roast off all the tires, even though this thing is not gonna hook up that well, especially on a road like this that's not perfect. We're still gonna use a little bit of tire up. That's the name of the game. But this way we'll get a solid time to compare to the other vehicles that I've tested, and we won't have to damage any clutches or drive lines or anything like that. How fast does it go in first gear? If I just go kind of slowly towards red line, will it hit 60 in first? Wow, it will. Wow. That's got to help the 0 to 60 time so much. Now, it won't hit 70, so we will have to do a 1-2 shift. I had to do one little pre-test of this, and when I rolled into the throttle at 15 miles an hour, the tires lit up a little bit. They got a little sideways, so we're leaving on all the traction control, leaving on everything possible, just to make sure that we don't have any problems and get in any trouble here in someone else's car. So let's go down into first, make sure we're not gonna pick any fights with anybody, reset our timing gear here. Okay, 10 miles an hour. Just gonna roll into it. Here we go. Madness. Utter madness. Wow. 20 to 70, 3.98 seconds. I need a detox after that. That is silly. And this is not a good surface. I mean, there's tons of seal coat, crack seal all over this asphalt. This is far from a drag strip. And I short shifted. This car is brutal. I mean, it's a scary thing to say, oh, I'm gonna go fast in this car. You've gotta be on it. This is not as simple as flooring it in a Tesla or a Lucid or even a Porsche. It's another thing. Even in eco and touring modes, whenever you really get on the throttle, the exhaust valves open up anyway. So there's no real way to keep this super stealthy, fly under the radar, don't make a lot of noise. It's gonna make a lot of noise. Also, more excuses. We're at a DA of 4,331 feet because it's hot, it's 92 degrees. This is suboptimal conditions. I know there's somebody out there going, well, some magazine tested the car and it did 0 to whatever in this much time. I understand that. And those guys test fast cars all day long for a living. That's my dream to be able to do this. So this is an acclimation period to try and figure out how to do this responsibly and get decent results for you guys. Let's try it again. Wow. Madness. Utter madness. That was 3.79. So a little better. I took it to redline, almost. I've always been the kind of person that after I drive a car hard, I feel like I need to baby it for a while and just let it like relax again. Like I'd done some hard workout and I need to just let the car chill and recover and just cool back down, if you will. So now that we've experienced the brutality of how fast the C7 Z06 is, we need to go back into the studio and give it a fun to drive score. And then we'll rank it on my board of all the cars that I've driven on the fun to drive score so far and see just how well it stacks up. Let's go. I'm excited for this one because that Z06 was really, really fun to drive. So let's see how that reflects in the fun to drive score. The first category here is all about inputs. How does the car feel to drive? How communicative of a driver's car is it? Number one, for steering feel, it gets a 9 out of 10. Fantastic steering. 7 out of 10 for the shifter feel. I wanted to give it more, but the shifter was just disappointing. I'm sure you could fix it in the aftermarket, but as it was on the stock one, it wasn't great. For pedal feel, it gets an 8 out of 10. For suspension feel, it gets an 8 out of 10. For responsiveness, it gets an 18 out of 20. Super responsive, right up there with the very best. For outright speed, it gets 19 out of 20. This thing is absolutely ridiculous. Technically, there are things out there that are faster, but this thing is right up there. I mean, you don't need to go any faster than this. It's crazy. And for one of my very favorite categories, integrity to what's promised, it gets a 19 out of 20 there. It promises to be this over-the-top sports car, borderline supercar, and that's exactly what it is. Now for the experience category, and that's more of the livability of the car and how nice it is to be in. Number one, for interior quality, it only gets a 6 out of 10. It's really not very good in there, so it's livable, it's fine, but it's not going to get a very good score there. Exterior looks gets an 8 out of 10. Beautiful. For comfort, only a 5 out of 10, mostly due to the suspension and the very, very thin tires. Could be better there. Maybe you swap out the wheels and tires and you bump up that score. For tech, it only gets a 5 out of 10 also because it's pretty basic. For shareability, it gets an 8 out of 10 because you can totally put somebody in the passenger seat. You've got plenty of room in the trunk to go on a road trip if you want to. It's pretty darn shareable for what it is. And then for value for money, it gets a 19 out of 20. For the dollars that you actually pay for this thing, what an experience. It is truly incredible. So that gives us a total input score of 88 and a total experience score of 51, which as it stands gets us an 81.8 overall, and that would already be the top of the leaderboard here, and we haven't even factored in the miles per mile bonus. And here's where you can get up to 10 points extra just for being so much fun to drive that it puts a smile on your face. For the 2015 Corvette Z06, it gets an extra 8 points here, 8 out of 10 just for miles per mile, which gives us an overall grand total of 89.8. That is a new clear leader for the fun to drive score. The next closest competitor is a GR86 at a 74.6, so this Corvette Z06 is way up at the top. And we've still yet to find anything that's up there above 90. It's going to be pretty tough, but we're going to keep searching. This Corvette was fantastic to drive, and I'm convinced it's going to go down in the record books as one of these very highly desirable cars. Once EVs have kind of taken over and they're the norm, to find something like this that's such a raw, visceral, simple experience, it's going to be one of these cars that people fight over. And I can't wait to compare it to something like the new C8 Z06 or even just a regular C8 with like a Z51 package and see how they stack up as a fun to drive score. If you're still here 20 plus minutes through the end of this video, then do me a favor and subscribe because this is the kind of thing that you want to watch. These are the kind of videos that I really love to make and I want to make more of. The tricky thing is they're just pretty expensive. I had to rent this car myself and pay several $100s to spend this time with it. because frankly, I'm not famous enough or meaningful enough on the internet for people to just loan me their car, or companies to reach out and send me cars to review. And so for you to subscribe and like the video just gives a signal to the internet and to the algorithm that, hey, this is a good video, people should pay more attention to this guy and should give him more access to more cars. If you want to see even more, including behind the scenes of how these videos get made and make suggestions for what future videos could be, check out the members only section here on YouTube. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.